So I'm just going to ask you a little bit about life in those two churches. I think there is a word, you'll have to correct my pronunciation, in Arabic called sumud.
Sumud?
Yes, which means steadfastness. Is that right?
Right.
I think those of us who are aware of the situation, insofar as we can be living here in Steyning, are amazed at the steadfastness of the people of Palestine. Can you tell us a little bit about what it is like for the people in your churches and how it is that they manage to keep their faith?
Thank you. Well, that's I think, an important question to look how oppressed people navigate their faith journey during very difficult times, and how we can learn from them, but how we can also encourage them and support them. Well, we all know that the Palestinian community had the Nakba in 1948, and that Nakba included the Nakba, the catastrophe of the Christian community, where 50,000 Christians out of the 2,000 were living were forced out to leave the country. And the Anglican Church in Palestine lost 5 congregations. Churches were closed because the entire congregations were displaced, like in Haifa, in Jaffa, in Acre, in Bisan, and in West Jerusalem. These people just were forced to leave their communities, and they left their lovely, churches. That era was very hard for the people, and many of them actually started questioning. As we always read in the Bible, when there is hardships, we always ask the why question. Why, God? Why did you allow this to happen? Why we had to be forced out of our country? Why we had to live in refugee camps? So this why question was that faith struggle within the Christian community for a long time. But eventually, because in every step through these years, we saw Christ walking with us, strengthening us. And when we talk about sumud, it is that empowerment of our faith that makes sumud possible. Because you don't be steadfast or resilient out of your own power, or because you're a superhero. There is an empowerment that keeps that sumud. And for the Christian community, it is Jesus walking with us through these days. His presence. His real presence. Whether in worship, whether in the community, whether in acts of love, whether in acts of solidarity, you feel that Christ is walking with you through that journey. And He is giving us that, energy. When we talk about the Holy Spirit, we talk about that energy that keeps you going, keeps you steadfast.
Can you tell us a little bit about some of the difficulties that your congregation have to face in their daily lives?
Well, there are many. Today, as I said yesterday, we feel we live in a confined space where we cannot live easily, or live easily, or move easily. There is a restriction on movement, and we live in a structure of permits. So if you want to go to Jerusalem, you need a permit. If you want to travel, you need a permit. If you want to cross a checkpoint, you need a permit. So actually the Palestinians, if you talk to them, their daily discussion is about permits because of that constraint on movement. But of course, because people cannot move, then they cannot reach their working place. Some of them lost their work. And of course, if you need to work in Israel, you need a permit. And if your permit is revoked, my nephew, for the last 2 years, for example, didn't get a permit to work. So he's without work for the last 2 years. He's 25 years old. So you can imagine a 25 years old man sitting at home doing nothing because he can't work. So there is an economic burden on the community. There is, of course, a political burden, but what is life-threatening is the settler violence. When people move or try to cross between villages and cities, they're usually attacked by settlers. And I'm sure you've heard about Taibeh, a Christian village that continued to be attacked every now and then by settlers. It was visited by most of the diplomatic missions, but that didn't mean anything for these fanatics, extremists who continue to perpetrate havoc on the Christian communities. I myself was attacked by settlers just driving home from Jericho, coming actually from abroad. So that life-threatening experience is very hard for people. And the last thing I there are many things, but the last thing I want to mention is the psychological stress, psychological trauma that because in Palestine we never talk about post-traumatic stress. There is no post. It's an ongoing trauma. It's an ongoing struggle. It's an ongoing hardship. Whereas in other places you talk about post-traumatic stress. No, we talk about an ongoing stress, ongoing trauma. And that psychological stress, of course we know scientifically that it causes even physical illness, physical problems. And that's why we start staying young people age 35, 40 with heart attacks. They would just collapse. So that psychological stress is very, very dangerous for the community. And finally, I think if you ask most Palestinian parents about that stress, they would say, number one, we are very stressed about the future of our children. Because it's not safe for them, and we want the best for our children, and there is no way to do that. And like personally, as in my family, I make sure that my children come home before sunset, because they can't be outside late at night because it's dangerous. And whenever they go to school, they take them to school, and we bring them back from school. It's not dangerous even for them to walk to school. And that continuous, psychological stress is very much burdening.
I think there is some work being done on helping people with trauma through the Friends of the Holy Land. Is that right?
Yes. Immediately after October 7th and the retaliation, the aggression retaliation against Gaza and all what we saw in Gaza, personally, in my community, I felt the people were very much depressed, very much traumatized. I'm sure you did not see much of the scenes that we have watched on our screens coming from Gaza. They were very painful. And so we started a trauma program at St. Andrews, like the first 2 weeks after the war. And it was successful. It gave people, whether with music, sports, and just coming together and sharing our feelings. And it was very helpful. So I was aware from the very beginning that I needed to do this with the community. And then after the war, we have done some research on the psychological well-being, and we found that it's disastrous. And we've seen this in children at school, in their behavior with families, with parents, with the youth groups. So with others, I personally reached to different experts around the world who came together and put a kind of a program that we need to apply for our community. So we already started a trauma center, psychotrauma center in Ramallah. And that center will have different programs for schools, for parishes, even for clergy. Because sometimes we forget that clergy are also traumatized. And when clergy, hear the stories of their parishes, they have a second-hand trauma. So there will be different programs in that center for children, for young families, programs for the schools, but also for parishioners. We introduced something that we call trauma retreat. So it's a retreat because this is a faith-based trauma program. It's not something we brought from abroad. It's something that was developed by experts from the Palestinian context. And so there is the trauma retreat program, and there is the clergy retreat trauma program. So the reason we all think this is important is that if we leave that trauma ingrained inside the mind and hearts of these people, eventually they won't be able to grow a healthy life. So we need to address, especially among children. Schools are struggling. Teachers are struggling. I mean, students today in Palestine, they have no more 5 minutes concentration. They can't concentrate for more than 5 minutes. And that is because of the psychological stress. So we had to, deal with all of that, and that's why we're paying special attention to the trauma program.
Gosh, yes, that sounds very important work. Somebody asked me the other day, I wonder how the Christians and the Muslims in Palestine work together.
Well, in Palestine, the Christians and the Muslims, they're one indigenous community to the Palestinian society. We have never faced like a large scale or an obvious prejudice from the Muslim community. Like on the contrary, there is more cooperation and mutuality and cohesiveness among the community. That doesn't mean that there won't be, incidents here and there where some Christians would experience some kind of prejudice. Doesn't mean that. I mean, that happens in every community, including here in the UK, where minorities may feel threatened. But I would say there is a huge cooperation between the two communities. And for many years this was the case. And actually when the Jewish community before 1948, there was a cohesive, a relationship between the three, Christian, Muslims and Jews. It all started after 1948 and after, the creation of the state and the separation of the two people and the war. But no, we have really good relations. They share our even Christian feasts. I mean, I invite you, if you want to come to Ramallah, to come during the Holy Week, because we have a very special march for the Easter Vigil, the Holy Fire Vigil, and where the Muslims and the Christians would carry the candles of the light of Christ and march on the streets. Very, very beautiful. But again, as I said, that doesn't mean that there are not, some prejudice against Christians. And I think part of that prejudice is because our relationship with the Christian West. So some Muslims think that, the Christians who live in the Holy Land, they're not indigenous. They're part of the West that is part of their suffering. So, and that's why there is an instant education that no, these Christians are even before the Muslims. And I always get pride when the President Mahmoud Abbas says that, the Christians are indigenous before we came to this land. So, no, there is much appreciation. We have 11 cities and towns in Palestine that by law the mayor should be Christian. Right. So Ramallah, the mayor is always Christian, cannot be but Christian. Beit Lahm, Beit Jala, Beit Sahur, Beit Zayd, Zababdi, so Jericho. There are several places where there are Christian communities, by law, the mayor should be Christian.
Interesting.
And that is a way to, from the Palestinian government, is to appreciate the presence and minister of the Christian community. I just need to say, we are 50,000, around 40,000 people. I mean, the number dropped after the war. But you'll be surprised to know that the Christian church in Palestine, with that 1%, is the third hiring agency after the government and the honorable. The third hiring. So that tells you that, we're not only like a minority, but the way we serve the entire society in our schools. For example, in Ramallah, there are 9 Christian schools.
Right.
And these 9 Christian schools educate around 9,000 students every year. 8,000 students study in these schools, and hospitals, clinics, guest houses, community centers. So even though we're one, and I always remind people that this one is like the salt, but the impact in our society, the ministry that we provide to the larger Palestinian group, and to the larger Jewish group in Israel, of course, and to the larger Jordanian group, and to the larger Lebanese group. Because in Palestine, we make it our goal is that we're not closed on ourselves, we serve, everyone.
It's absolutely fascinating. I didn't know that. One last question, perhaps a little bit lighter. There's 2 bits to it. What was it like having the Archbishop of Canterbury coming to your church, and also what can we do in Steyning?
Well, it was a great honor to have the Archbishop of Canterbury, Sarah Mulali, at our St. Peter's in Birzeit. We had Archbishop Justin Wilby at St. Andrews 2 years ago, and we had the Archbishop of York last year. We had several bishops coming from the UK to visit, and it's always a solidarity pilgrimage. It's a solidarity visit with the Anglican Christian community. I would say number 1, it tells us that we're not forgotten. It tells us that church leaders care to come and visit. I mean, even during a wartime. It tells us how much the Holy Land is precious, not only to the Palestinian Christians, but also to the Christian family worldwide. Because we need always to remember that the story started there. And Palestine gave Christ to the world. Seriously. Like Palestine, in Bethlehem he was born, in Jerusalem he died, and and from Palestine, that mission, that commission went to the entire world. So we need to remember that this Holy Land is very precious for all of us. And when church leaders and when ordinary Christians, when people, pilgrims come and visit, it means that they care to come and see us in these very difficult times. And that is not only an encouragement, but it gives us hope. It gives us hope that we are part of the larger body of Christ, that there are siblings who care to come. And of course, when you come to Palestine, I explained the wall yesterday. So there's always, an encouragement to cross to the other side of the wall. Because some Christians, come for pilgrimage and only visit, churches, sites, historical sites, and very few of them would, ask, no, I visited the, stones, but I want to also visit the living stones. These living stones are part of the story, because you can't only visit, cold stones, building stones. You need to also witness and relate to the living stones. And we're very encouraged by all those who cross the wall to come to the West Bank and visit us. It's an encouragement.
Thank you so much for sharing so much of your experiences, not just this morning, but last night and yesterday afternoon as well, for those of us who were lucky to hear you. I think I'm very conscious that every time you do this a lot, don't you? You go all over the place talking to people, trying to help people to understand what's happening out there. But each time you tell this, I think it must go very close to your heart. And
of course.
Brings.
Yeah. Well, I always tell people it's not easy because you live the trauma again and again and again.
Yeah.
Because whenever you recount what is happening, you're living it again. There are two. That's painful, of course, and it's always stressful. But that leads me to the second part of your question with Sarah Malaria, the Archbishop of Canterbury, that what we can do is, I said yesterday and I say that today, it's very important that we come together for a righteous cause, come together for justice and peace, and to come together to heal the wounds of the victims. And that I invite you to, when I leave, to come together, to form like a group of people who would, discuss what we can do after we have witnessed and heard this story and the situation of our brothers and sisters. So, as Father Mark said in the Gospel today, and quoting the verse from John, we need to love, not in words, but in deeds, in action.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been really a pleasure to be here. This is one of the amazing places I visited, and it was. I could feel the closeness, and I could feel the love and care that you show to your brothers and sisters. And for that, I'm grateful. I'm grateful to Father Mark for his encouragement and support. And I'm grateful to everyone who participated in making this visit successful. And I hope that we not only visit you, but we welcome you at St. Andrews and St. Peter's. And it is possible. It's not dangerous. Yeah, we'll wait some time until we know that the war won't resume. But we invite you to come and see. And this phrase, come and see, is important. Because there is nothing transformative like seeing with your own eyes. So, please, one of the things that you need to discuss is how to come and meet us there.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you.